The Monday edition of Morning News Today on ANC. Thanks for joining us. Now, the ANC is celebrating its 106th birthday today. It's the 8th of January. Way back in 1912, that's when the African National Congress was born. Now, in the lead up to the official celebrations, which will take place this weekend in East London in the Eastern Cape, the governing party will have its first meeting of the newly elected National Executive Committee come Wednesday, the 10th of January. Very busy week for the party. To help us unpack some of the key issues that it will be facing, we're joined in the studio by political analyst Karima Brown. Karima, good morning and compliments of the new year. It's the first time we're talking to you on this show in this new year. It's good to see you. Well, a busy week for the ANC. Just after the conference in December, it is the birthday, 106 years ago today. Lots of programs being planned, including honoring past presidents today, some of whom are buried in KwaZulu-Natal, as we know, like the founding president, John Langalibalele Dube. And that's where we found Cyril Ramaphosa and some of the ANC officials since this weekend. How significant is this visit in KwaZulu-Natal and how they are approaching it, starting by paying a visit and gifting some cattle to the Zulu King Goodwill Zwelithini?
Look, I think that, you know, the significance cannot be overstated, Dan, more so if you look at the instability, the consistent instability in KwaZulu-Natal. As we know, the African National Congress provincial structures there embroiled in a legal challenge. We still don't know who that legal representatives are. We're waiting for the appeal to go through, but there's of course also an enforcement order. So legally there is no provincial leadership in that province. And I think what Cyril Ramaphosa as president of the ANC said yesterday when they paid that visit to the Zulu King was that they came to report back, and he was walking a very tightrope, choosing his language very carefully, saying that they have come there to report on the fact that the outcomes of the conference has been successful, both in terms of its electoral outcomes and policy outcomes. Now we know, of course, there's a number of challenges to the process, and I think Cyril Ramaphosa and the Zulu King very careful in their choice of words, Dan, to give you know, the final word on the fact that the results must be accepted by those who won and those who lost. And then of course that emphasis on the issue of land, both the Zulu King and Cyril Ramaphosa speaking to that question, and that of course a policy discussion that resulted in a decision, a firm decision at the conference: land without compensation, of course not ruining you know, the stability of the farming community and food security. But I think that Cyril Ramaphosa choosing to start in the place where he faces the most challenges in KwaZulu-Natal, it is of course also President Jacob Zuma's stronghold. We saw earlier in the week some chiefs saying hands of Zuma, and this comes as Parliament has 30 days in which to sit down and amend its rules to look at how it gives effect to Section 89, which speaks to how you remove a president by way of impeachment. And of course it comes amid the fact that Cyril Ramaphosa has his first NEC meeting, which, you know, you said in your introduction,
it's coming on Wednesday.
Yes.
Yeah. Before we get there, I just saw the headline. I mean, in the Witness, I know you don't get the Witness in the morning here in Johannesburg. We get in the studio. King calls for ANC unity, and that message around unity and urging the factions in the ANC to settle differences, still very much with us.
Absolutely. I think what is going to be very instrumental here is the extent to which Cyril Ramaphosa is going to have to emerge as the president of the entire ANC, not just the faction who brought him to power. And of course this will depend on the extent to which he gives life to what unity means. Remember, before the conference, Dan, we said if unity means, for example, the continued capture of the state, the continued hollowing out of state institutions to serve political purposes, then that's a false unity. The courts have been very strict and its rulings are quite profound. Cyril Ramaphosa has a couple of very strict court rulings to adhere to, and we will see whether this first NEC meeting, whether he's going to be able to persuade his committee, his National Executive Committee, to fall in line the way they did at the conference. Remember at the beginning of conference, Gwede Mantashe, at the time part of the steering committee, saying we are going to comply with the court decisions. And if that is going to be the way in which Cyril Ramaphosa Ramaphosa proceeds going forward, then of course one can be able to see that, you know, he's going to align the African National Congress with the rule of law. But it's going to be a very difficult tightrope, because of course there are people who will of course have to come under the firing line if that position of complying with the law is held to Dan.
Yeah, and some of them are in the top 6.
Yes.
I was just reflecting the other day. ANC historically, in its 106 years of life, has always position itself as non-racial, non-sexist, democratic organization. When you say non-racial, therefore you mean you don't use tribal base or regional base or anything. But if you look at the top 6, for the first time in its history or in a long time, you look at the people where they come from in that top 6 and how KwaZulu-Natal might be feeling about it. It brings into an interesting dynamic and complexity in the discussions of the ANC and how they manage the whole Jacob Zuma question going forward. Am I wrong?
No, you're spot on. In fact, yesterday I was involved in a very interesting conversation with ANC comrades about this issue, because some people were saying, even though they understand tactically the need to start in KwaZulu-Natal, there's the impression that's being created that the Zulu monarch is the only traditional leader that needs to be respected and paid homage to. And of course we know that the top 6 is meeting with all the traditional leaders. They're moving to the Eastern Cape. But there is a sense among some people that there is overemphasis on the issue of satisfying and appeasing the so-called Zulu question. And of course we need to understand the complexities around that and realize that under the presidency of President Jacob Zuma, when he was the president of the ANC, because he embraced traditional leadership with the kind of zest, the Zulu king became even more fated. And of course when he was in times of trouble, Dan, he ran to his hinterland, he ran to those rural communities to rely on. And in many ways people saw that as an harking back to almost a Bantustan nature of politics, a regression in terms of the kind of modernization and also the kind of constitutionalism that also are currents that runs in the African National Congress. So one cannot overstate the importance of that meeting of yesterday. But I think if there is a fetishization of the so-called Zulu concerns, then the ANC does run the risk of being seen as a tribal organization. And of course we know all those years ago, 106 years ago, the clarion call for the formation of the ANC was in fact the unity of all the African people over and above tribe. And I think the ANC needs to get back, you know, to those kinds of roots.
I mean, you had traditional leaders from every corner of South Africa in Mangaung setting up the ANC, and hopefully that spirit remains of uniting people. NEC coming on Wednesday, you've mentioned a couple of things that and people are saying, you know, will Cyril's views and stuff hold sway or not? It's a very tough balance. If you just preview it and you're thinking about it, what should they be tackling first? Of course, there's a January 8th statement that needs to be finalized, because he delivers it as a president of the ANC on behalf of the National Executive Committee.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. That is a collective statement, of course, but we are going to be looking for traces of the leadership of this president, of Cyril Ramaphosa. We are going to be looking for the tone, for the delivery. It is a statement of the National Executive Committee. What is interesting is when the court, the Constitutional Court, ruled on whether Parliament did or did not, you know, hold the president accountable following that ruling, the ANC statement that it released under the name of its Deputy Secretary General, Jesse Duarte, was that it noted the judgment and it will discuss it, of course, on Wednesday. So we know that formally, by the ANC's own word, that the matter will in fact be, you know, on the agenda. One of the other things in the speaking notes that we've seen the ANC give to its leaders has been to, the ANC is also expected to deal with this question of free higher education. We saw the kind of bombshell that the ANC, the state president rather, threw on the very first day of that conference. You've been speaking about Deputy Minister of Higher Education, Butimana Manela, meeting with stakeholders, one of which is the EFF Student Command. So those are some of the issues, of course, that one expects the ANC president to speak to. But I think the future of President Jacob Zuma is going to be something that this NEC will obviously not be able to sidestep, but it's going to be a very delicate matter. Some people are suggesting things like an amnesty, others are suggesting a special tribunal around, you know, capture. The problem for me with all of the speculation is that we have a constitution The NEC of the ANC cannot put together a special prosecutorial order. The NPA is the only structure that can, of course, do that. And we know that the courts have already ruled on, for example, the fact that the president is conflicted in setting up the head of the NPA because they have to investigate him potentially. So those are all things that the NEC will have to, of course, give guidance on, and we'll be looking very carefully at that January.
It's not going to be an easy discussion on Wednesday.
No, not at all. Not at all.
We'll watch and see. And also watch and read that tonality you spoke about when Cyril Ramaphosa, as ANC president, delivers that January 8th statement in East London on Saturday.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Karima, for your time. That's Karima Brown. He's the political analyst, just giving us a little bit of a political focus as we have a dipstick into how this new year is starting for the governing party, the ANC, on its 106th birthday.